Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. Since its beginnings in 2023, the conflict in Sudan between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces has become one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters. The conflict has disrupted services, destroying infrastructure and causing massive displacement, leaving more than 15 million children vulnerable, with even more being reported to be out of school. Access to health, water, sanitation and protection services is severely impaired, especially in conflict-affected areas. While Sudanese actors hold the primary responsibility for peace, the UK and broader Western community can still play a meaningful role and apply various strategies to influence an end to the conflict diplomatically, economically, and through humanitarian channels. For example, there could be a coordinated diplomatic pressure, as currently mediation is fragmented, with the IGAD, the African Union, Saudi Arabia-US Jeddah talks and other regional powers all involved separately and all backing different sides of the war. The UK, EU and US could work to support a unification of entities, helping to create a single, credible peace process. Britain's historic ties to Sudan and its seat on the UN Security Council gives it leverage to convene over these efforts. This approach could provide pressure with embargoes or incentivise with conditional trade deals for these states to stop military support and agree on a regional non-interference pact. There could also be an economic and sanctions policy imposing and enforcing stricter sanctions on individuals and entities funding or arming either faction, including gold traders, logistics firms and financial intermediaries in Dubai or Cairo. The West can coordinate sanctions through the US Magnitsky Act, UK Global Human Rights Sanctions Regime, and EU frameworks to freeze assets and restrict travel. As an incentive for peace, debt relief, economic assistance and development packages could be offered to a future transitional government that commits to civilian rule and links aid to clear accountability benchmarks, especially on human rights and inclusive governance. Access to aid could also be scaled up. The UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and Western partners could push for humanitarian corridors through negotiations with both sides. This could help to increase direct funding to Sudanese NGOs and local networks, rather than relying only on large international agencies, which are often blocked. There could also be support for civilian protection mechanisms through remote monitoring, satellite-based documentation, and early warning systems which could track atrocities like those in Darfur and advocate for a UN-mandated arms embargo and expansion of human rights monitoring under the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. There could also be greater support for democratic civilian forces, such as the Forces for Freedom and Change and resistance committees. Western nations could provide training and protection for civil society organisers, platforms for these groups to participate in peace talks, and conditional funding tied to inclusivity and gender representation. Post-conflict planning could also see a Marshall Plan-style framework for reconstruction under a civilian transitional authority, signalling to Sudanese leaders that peace brings tangible benefits. Legal measures could also support accountability. A push for renewed ICC engagement to prosecute war crimes and atrocities, especially those involving attacks on civilians and ethnic cleansing in Darfur, and encourage regional human rights tribunals under the AU, hybrid courts modelled on Sierra Leone's tribunal, and universal jurisdiction laws, which the UK and EU have, to prosecute war criminals who travel abroad. Finally, the UK and Western partners could use strategic messaging and soft power by using public diplomacy and international media platforms to highlight atrocities and humanitarian needs, counter misinformation from warring factions, and most importantly, keep Sudan on the global agenda, which has been overshadowed by other crises like Gaza and Ukraine. However, even with strong Western engagement, several obstacles expose the challenges and realities of influencing a successful conclusion to Sudan's current conflict and humanitarian crisis. With competing regional interests, limited Western leverage and blocked access to aid, how can the UK and broader Western community support an African-led mediation without the risk of perceived neo-colonialism? It must always be remembered that Western involvement must support sovereignty and self-determination and not replace it. If you liked this podcast, then stay on this listening platform, click the subscribe button and check out my other episodes related to this one, such as the previous episode, Sudan, the Forgotten Remembrance, Colonialism on Your Doorstep from the first season, and Colonialism, Just a Thing of the Past, parts 1 and 2 from the 4th season. And don't forget what I like to call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement, my stories or poetic narratives, Caribbean Wind, Caribbean Rush, Nights at the Round Table, the Berlin Conference 1884, and Gone with the Wind, Macmillan's Speech for Change. These are all available on the website in paperback, on Amazon in Kindle format, and in ebook format at Apple Books and all other digital platforms. And also the publication of the latest 4 titles. Now, if you want to find out more, just visit storiestobetold.com and check out the learning platforms for The Journey's End, Giving Back Hong Kong, Bite from the Big Apple, A Story for New York, Hope for Zimbabwe, Arise the Phoenix, and A Story for South Africa. And we're marking the start of Season 6 with a special shout out and thank you to Vineet and the entire team at Million Podcasts. We are making an announcement that Stories to be Told, the podcast series, has been recognised as one of the top 10 British Empire podcasts on the web by the Million Podcast panel. We are also featured in their top 25 history teacher podcasts and top 60 history podcast for students. Just check out the links in the show notes. If you'd like to sign up to my email list, visit the website where you can opt in and receive your free samples of my first 4 titles. And finally, remember that you can also send me an audio message on the SpeakPipe link, which is also in the show notes, so don't be a stranger. Feel free to like, follow and share us on social media when you visit the website. Just click onto whichever social media link you would like to follow us on. And, as always, it is a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast series, and I encourage you to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. I'm Tracy DW, and this is a Stories to be Told podcast. Stay safe, stay well, stay blessed. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next